Hello, welcome back to the Underhand Free Throw. I am Simon, and today me and my co-host Ian are doing a short little series of videos in which we're going to talk about some teams that are sleeping giants, is what we're calling them. They're maybe a little bit better than their record says that they are, and we're going to talk about why that is and whether we should be taking these teams a little bit more seriously over the course of the rest of the season. Also, if you're just stumbling across this video and you never heard of us before, we upload fairly frequently. We try to do 2 or 3 times a week. We talk about the NBA as many channels do, but we try to take a step back and take a more long-term look at how teams are going, how the season is progressing, and how players are improving and teams are changing over time, rather than talking about just the day-to-day goings on of the league. If you're interested in that sort of thing, please consider subscribing. So the team on the menu for today is the Philadelphia 76ers. Despite not having the best record in the East, are they a team that we should be looking at more closely as a contender?
So anyways, let's swing eastward. Let's turn our gaze to the East, where we have some slightly less impressive sleeping giants, but still, I think, bear a lot of mention, especially because these two East teams we're going to talk about have a lot more injury problems than the Pelicans or the Mavs have had, meaning that like the Pelicans and the Mavs are playing really well right now, and we can expect them to continue to play well. These next two teams we're going to talk about are also playing pretty well, not as well as them, but they also have some pretty obvious injury problems that are going to resolve themselves, assumedly, at some point, meaning that like even by looking at their net rating and their simple and their SRS, they might actually be even better than those numbers. So the first team we're going to talk about, maybe the most injured team in the league right now, like as of tonight, and that is the Philadelphia 76ers, who are without James Harden, who went out like a month ago now. Tyrese Maxey is going to miss a couple weeks with a foot injury, and Joel Embiid is out for a couple games with not too serious of an injury, but they are going to they're probably going to lose it. I think they won. Who'd they beat last night without Embiid?
They beat the Nets.
Yeah, that's an embarrassing loss for the Nets. For everyone being like, yeah, we got to figure it out under Jack Vaughn. It's like, oh, really? You lost to the Sixers in Ben Simmons' return game without, like, you didn't have to face Embiid, Harden, or Maxey, and you lost that game. That was a bad one. It wasn't even.
I watched that game. The surprising thing is, like, the 76ers, even without their 3 best players, still looked like a team. I mean, they were pinging the ball around and finding open shooters and making shots, and the Nets just looked as disjointed and off sync with each other as always. So despite having clearly superior talent, they lost to a bunch of role players, which is the way the Nets season has gone. But we're not here to talk about the Nets. We're here to talk about the Sixers. So despite the injury issues, why do you see the Sixers as such a sleeping giant?
I think they've played really bad. And have had the injury problems that I already mentioned. And somehow, despite that, like they've played a really, really tough schedule, and they are a top 6 team in the league by SRS, and they're 11th in net rating. They somehow have a top 4 defense and about a league average offense, again, despite missing their all their offensive engines for good chunks of time now. The bench looked really off. They were one of those teams that came out of the gates awful. Like their bench, they had one game where their bench scored like 4 points or something like that early in the season. Just like clearly did not have good defined roles. They're really, really reliant on Joel Embiid, who also started the season out of shape. So it's like I just see like they've had not a worst case scenario start, but a really, really bad scenario in terms of their start to the season. And as you kind of just like look at the details, it does the way that people projected them going into the season, which was as a sort of like upper tier contender. I see all the ingredients are very clearly still there. Joel Embiid is primed to have another monster season if he can get his health together. Tyrese Maxey is taking the leap that people hoped he would, and James Harden looked a little bit better than he did last year. Like, just moves a little bit better, is playing a little bit differently. Hasn't been shooting the ball that well, or wasn't shooting the ball that well before he went down, but was like getting into a step back pretty well, passing the ball pretty well, and just sort of like being that point guard that lets Tyrese Maxey attack off the ball and gets the ball with Joel Embiid. It didn't look pretty. Like the Sixers season, nothing has looked good except for that beautiful Joel Embiid, like 50 whatever point game that he had. That monster,
59, I think. Yeah.
59 with like 7 blocks and 8 assists, and like one of like just one like one of the greatest games I've ever, like regular season games I've ever seen anyone play. Like like none of us have ever seen someone score 59 points, get 15 rebounds, get 8 assists, and get 7 blocks. Like, and he was just on, like he was just crushing people. He was like, I know it's against a weak like Utah interior defense, but it was incredible to watch it.
Well, yeah, it was a weak interior defense, but he was still like splashing mid-range jumper after mid-range jumper that were all like well contested. It wasn't simply him overpowering smaller, weaker defenders the entire game, although he did plenty of that as well.
Well, they brought in Walker Kessler, I remember at one point in the game, and it was very clear, like, oh, Embiid can't quite body Walker Kessler to the same extent he can body Olynyk and Markkanen, and it just didn't like. And Walker played really good defense. I was like I was watching his feet. I'm like, you're playing this perfectly. You got a hand up to contest, and it didn't matter at all. Joel Embiid just like rose and knocked down shot after shot. Like there was no point. It didn't matter who the defender was that night. Like Joel Embiid was just going to, like, when he's in his like mid-range bag like that and just looking like a 7'2" Kevin Durant, like a 7'2", 300-pound Kevin Durant. It was just it's pretty unstoppable. I'm a big Sixers hater, for the record. Like they're a team that I actively root against. I really hate watching them play. So it brings me no joy in this segment to be like, I think Philly is going to be as good as people thought they're going to be. I didn't think I think you thought they were going to be good. I think in our season's previews, you had them at number 2 or something like that, or and I wanted to bump them down. I didn't like. I didn't like the whole shape of the rotation. I still don't like the whole shape of the rotation. I hate it that PJ Tucker has stopped shooting again. I think that, like, they're way too reliant on George Niang for bench offense. Like Daniel House has not been good. Shake Milton has actually played okay, but that's not like that. That's not going to move the needle that much. Matisse Thybulle is out of the rotation. So anyways, Sixers hater. That a Sixers hater is here saying, I think Philly's really good. I think that they are going to be a third. If their injury luck clears up, they're going to be a top 3 team in the East this year.
Yeah,
maybe top 4, because I really like Cleveland.
I'm also not high on the Sixers purely for basketball reasons, just like style of play. I don't particularly enjoy watching the free throw baiting, although I will say on the bright side this year, Joel Embiid, it's never been worse. He's shooting a career high over 12 free throws a game. There's a lot of flopping / attempting.
It's nonstop. It's the most aggressive thing I've ever seen.
Yeah. I mean, Joel Embiid has been, it's effective. It works in the regular season. I have questions about how effective of a style of play this is for winning playoff games, but at least when it comes to regular season production, it clearly works. But on the bright side, the rest of the team has not been drawing free throws particularly well. And the Sixers overall as a team are in the lower half of the league in free throw rates. So even though we have to stomach watching Embiid go to the line 10 million times a game, at the very least, it is limited to Embiid this year. Harden has not been able to get up to his old ways of, being in the high 9s or 10s in the free throw attempts per game.
He'll be back. Don't get too comfortable watching the average amount of free throw attempts that they're generating, because James Harden will come back and Joel Embiid will be healthy. But yeah, I mean, we did see that a little bit in the Raptors series last year. The refs got sick of giving calls to Joel Embiid. Like he got to the line whenever he wanted early in the series, and then the refs just kind of, just gave him a little bit less. And Joel Embiid is not a happy man when he doesn't get to the line, even though he knows that he's foul baiting. I've heard him talk about it. He talks about, like, he's also like, I think he's a genius at taking advantage of of undisciplined defenders. Like if you make a mistake with Joel Embiid, he's going to draw a foul. If you stick your hand in the cookie jar, he's going to catch you. If you try to body him in a way that's like slightly illegal, he's going to lean into that contact. He's going to accentuate it. He's also a very aggressive player that creates a ton of contact. So like he's going to force you to want to play physical with him. And when you play physical with him, he is ready with all kinds of counters, and all those counters are foul drawing. And it really is painful to watch. And the fact that he also has this whole I fall on the ground to avoid injury thing on top of it, that he mixes in with the I fall on the ground to draw fouls component of his game, is like,
seem to go hand in hand.
Yeah. He's the biggest bad guy in the NBA in terms of just watching basketball. I do not understand how someone can watch the game and be rooting for Joel Embiid. Like he's like this glorious wrestling heel that's like, and when he's playing well, he's like mocking the other team, and he's taunting the opponents and working the crowd. And when he's not playing well, he is sulking like a baby, and like it's the most horrific thing that I've seen from a basketball player, and I kind of love it. Like it's like I really appreciate Joel Embiid, and I think he's a genius, and I think he's one of the best basketball players I've ever seen play. Definitely one of the biggest talents. But like I root so hard against this guy. I want him to lose. I want to see him sulk.
Yeah, I mean the sad part with Embiid, I mean, there's kind of a couple issues with Embiid. And I mean, he puts up amazing regular season production, but like conditioning is a big thing. And maybe that's part of why he's leaned into drawing fouls as such a major part of his game. You know, it slows the game down, helps him conserve energy. But also, and also like Embiid's just experienced a lot of just kind of minor knick-knack injuries that have kept him out, you know, especially in the playoffs. There's just been like a lot of them. But like the intensity and focus, like Embiid is an emotional player who kind of plays with his heart on his sleeve. And when things don't go well for him, you can see it affect his level of play. He'll be a little bit less willing to get back on defense in transition, or, you know, he'll be a little bit less engaged, you know, like making his defensive rotations and stuff. But the one thing I will say in Embiid's favor, and I'm also a lifelong critic of Joel Embiid, or as long as he's been in the NBA and in a significant star role, I guess, is we have seen a more engaged Embiid defensively so far this season. The past couple of seasons, you saw a bit of a drop off on his willing to just be a dominant interior force every single game. And you saw a drop off in the Sixers defense as a result. And I think large part of that was just how focused he was on chasing the MVP award, chasing as many stats as possible to put himself in that conversation. But this year, you're seeing an Embiid who, at least up to this point in the season, and hopefully it continues, is really engaged and locked in on defense. And the Sixers, despite having like some real issues defensively with their small backcourts, just the small size of their team in general, outside of Embiid, they're still an elite defense overall, and I think he's the driving force of that.
Yeah, the one thing that I would say, I think Embiid had some very bad luck in the playoffs. Really, and like, you know, like the torn hand, the broken face, he was like sick one year, like it never, like the only year he was healthy, like Ben Simmons was hurt, and the Sixers didn't really have a chance, and they got beat by Boston. Joel Embiid played great, but there is despite his incredible scoring ability, like, you know, he like there's some things he does that is, I feel like, makes him kind of like a modern day Wilt Chamberlain in terms of how like physically the combination of like the skill and the size and the mobility is just insane. It's very difficult in the playoffs to build your offense around someone who can't really pass. And Joel Embiid, it's not even that he's a willing passer. It's just that, like, compared to other offensive stars in the NBA, he's a reactive passer. Like, I've seen him we've all seen Joel Embiid throw some nice passes, but it's more like gets the ball, sees the defense come, someone becomes open, he reacts to the situation and throws the pass. He's not someone who makes a play in order to bend the defense in a way to create a passing opportunity. And
Yeah.
offensive NBA stars who carry teams to titles are generally capable of making those kinds of reads. And Joel Embiid in the playoffs has a negative assist to turnover ratio, which is just something you really don't see. I feel like people might be listening to this and they'll be like, well, Kawhi wasn't a great passer when he won a title with the Raptors. Just like it's on a different level though. Like Kawhi never had a negative assist. Like Kawhi averaged 4 assists per game and 3 turnovers in that playoff run with the Raptors, which is not good. It's just like, it's okay. Joel Embiid has a negative one, which is just really bad, which means what it means essentially is that you can mess this guy up and force him to make bad decisions. And that is something that can destroy your offense in the playoffs. Like Joel Embiid will pile up numbers, but he'll turn over the ball and he'll make the wrong read enough times that Sixers offense will not be elite. And that's like, and I don't really see him. He's going to be the most unstoppable singular scoring force, I think, in the NBA. But I think as someone who lifts team offense, there's a reason why Nikola Jokic wins MVP over him the last 2 years, and it's that like you can really easily build transcendent offense around Jokic, and with Embiid, there's a real problem when you run up into an elite defense that's going to force him to make difficult decisions.
Yeah, I'd agree. That's the reason why Jokic's on-off numbers are what they are. The reason why the team is so good on offense when he's on the floor and so bad when he's not. And the reason why Embiid, despite being like clearly a very good and impactful defensive player, is never like quite at the overall impact level of some of these other stars. Like the modern NBA is a versatile league, and you need to kind of be able to do everything as a star. And maybe that's an unrealistic expectation, but like it's also just reality, because if you aren't a perfectly well-rounded player who has no weaknesses in the playoffs to exploit, you're going to be beat by a team who does have one of those guys.
Yeah. Or even like, watching the Raptors didn't play well enough to beat the Sixers in the playoffs last year, but you saw when they started making things difficult for Embiid, you saw the Sixers just collapse. Like you saw where it started like, oh, Embiid is now struggling to like generate good offense, and therefore the Sixers no longer function. And that's like, that wasn't even against a very good team. I was like, this is like kind of scrappy, like really strong defensive, interesting team, but a team that had way more holes than the Sixers had. Do you have any last Sixers thoughts? Because I think this is an obvious point to jump into our final sleeping giant.
Yeah, I will say regular season Sixers, I'm in. I love it. I have a lot of questions when it comes to the postseason Sixers.
Yeah,
and
same.
I guess we will talk about that when the playoffs.
We didn't even hate on Doc Rivers.
No, not yet. But
that's we'll save that for the playoffs.